Hello, this is a quick introduction to how I use Sublime Text 2. It'll be an introduction and then the features that I find the most useful. So Sublime Text 2 is a text editor. It's lightweight, but at the same time has some nice IDE-like functionality. You can grab it from sublimetext.com/2. You can see it's available for Mac, Windows, and Linux. And most of the stuff we'll talk about works equally well across any of those three. So once you grab it and get it installed, the way that I typically launch it is from the command line because I like to launch it to edit a single file or a whole folder worth of files. So let's say I'm working on a project. I usually open the entire project folder with it, and I have a command line tool called Slime. Actually, when you install yours will be called Subl, S-U-B-L. I like Slime better, so I just aliased it. I'm going to open this folder, and you'll see we get two panes. So we have the sort of the file system navigation on the left and the editing pane on the right. First thing I'll jump into here is actually the preferences. So just like any Mac app, you can hit Command comma, and it'll open the preferences, which are actually stored as a JSON object. You can see some of the preferences that I use in here. Nothing too interesting. You see I have a ruler set up. That's what draws this line on the 79th column. Set my fonts and themes and things like that. The next thing we can find is that there are actually packages available. They're plugins for Sublime Text. The way that I get these is through it's called Sublime Package Control. Again, you can basically just Google for Sublime Package Control and install this here. Once you have Sublime Package Control installed, you can use it to install any further packages. The way you do that is through basically the first keyboard shortcut I'll show you here. It's Command-Shift-P. This brings up the Sublime command palette. Essentially all the commands that you can do within Sublime are here, whether they come from a plugin or part of the standard system. So I'll type in package. So we can see all of the package control related options here. I can list the packages that I have installed. So I have Git package control itself, Sublime Code Intel, Sublime Linter, Sublime Rope, Subversion. And these are really the plugins that I use. SVN and Git supply version control directly within the editor. Sublime Rope and Code Intel are both add IDE kind of functionality, auto completion, documentation on methods you're using, and things like that. Sublime Linter does linting for a variety of languages. Since I primarily use Python, it does PyFlakes and PEP8 checking on my code live as I'm editing it. So again, that command to get to the command palette, it was Command-Shift-P. All right, so now we have this list of files over on the left. Of course, you can click around in here, see what you want to see. Another thing you can do is you can switch between the two panels. So with the keyboard. So the left panel being this navigation over here, if I do Control-0, I can start keyboard navigating within here. And usually this is how I do it. I like to keep my hands on the keyboard. And then we can do Command-1 to get back over into the editing pane, or just select a file that I want to edit, like this. And we'll come open, of course we can edit files. Another thing you can do is, this is the default pane layout. If I do Option Command 2, it will switch to a 2-pane layout, and I could say open another file over here in this other pane. Control Option 3 goes to 3 panes, 4 goes to 4. Let's see, Option Command Shift 4, or actually 3 will go to a horizontal split. 2 goes to a horizontal split. You can also find these under the View menu under Layout. Then finally, there's Grid, where you can have 4 files displayed. If you have a big enough monitor, that can be useful. Just go back to 1, and you can see it's a tab-based editing experience here. So I talked about the command palette, how you get to that. Other useful shortcuts is Command P is the sort of find anything or go to anything in Sublime. So once I do Command P, you can start searching for file names if I wanted to find pod and edit that. And you can see as I'm looking through here, it's showing me previews of the files as they get searched. I can also search in other ways within a file. So let's say I pull open pod. If I wanted to search the symbols in here, I can do Command R. And it's the same go to anything, but it's automatically added this at symbol in there, which is how you go to symbols. So you can see I can go directly to the pod class, or I can go directly to the device method. This probably makes more sense if you have a file with more symbols in it, like this one here. Right? We can see all the symbols, and I can very quickly navigate to any of them. And this works for patterns too. So let's say I want this saved values. If I wanted to find a symbol's named values, I can just do values, and it does substring matches. Very quick to get around. Finally, the other common way to go to things in a file, especially if you're looking at tracebacks, is Control G. And you can see it's the same go to anything dialog, but it's put a colon in there, and that's to go to a line number. So this is how I could go to, say, line 111 very quickly. That's about it for the common getting around and going to things shortcuts. The next set of shortcuts are selection. I think this is an area where Sublime is considerably better than a lot of the editors I've used, especially in the ability to do multi-selections, right? So as I'm navigating around in the file, let's say I have string here. If I wanted to select the whole word that I'm looking at, I can do Command D to select the word. If I wanted to expand the selection to the entire line, I can do Command L, and it'll select the entire line for me. These are useful on their own, but then you can start to repeat them. Let's say I want to find string, so I'm going to Command D to select string. Then I can start hitting Command D over and over again, and it's going to find and select sequentially all of the occurrences of that pattern within the file. And now you can actually see that they are all selected, and I could say just type int and replace them all with int in one step. And you can kind of see here that I have my cursor in multiple places at once. This takes some getting used to, but once you get used to it, it's very powerful. You can do this beyond just initial selections. For example, let's say I wanted to replace all of these variable names. Since they aren't all the same thing, I can't just do Control D and then hold that down. That won't work. So what I can actually do is so if I hold down Shift and Control and arrow down 3 times, you can see I have multiple cursors at this point. Then if I hold down Shift, Alt, and Right, I'm going to select the whole word and replace all those at once. You can do this with copy and paste as well. So for example, something that I'll do very commonly as I'm saying building out this properties. And I'm writing a lot of the same code multiple times here. What I'll do is I'll put my link in here, say ID. I'm not going to spell it all out, but get the idea. Just like any other editor, I'm kind of using normal copying and pasting here, but now I can take these variables that I want in there, I can take them, I can select them. So now I have them all in my clipboard. Move my cursor, again using that was the Shift Control up and down, and just paste. Right, so now I have those 4 values in there. So this multi-selection combined with the clipboard becomes even more powerful. Let's see. So going on from there, there's finding support. You can do the typical thing with Command F. It's going to find within the file. I'm just going between them. Another thing you'll see here is when I do a selection, it will draw a box around other occurrences of that same string in the file. This is actually really useful when you're looking at variables in context. Maybe pull up something a little more complicated for that purposes. But for example, if I wanted to know, where am I using maps within this method, right? I can just select it, and then it's really easy for me to just eyeball everywhere that I'm using maps within this method. Of course, you can do finds within the project as well. This is done probably easiest, unfortunately you have to take your hands off the keyboard, is right-clicking on any folder, and you can say find in folder. Right? Let's search for this occurrence of start IP anywhere within this folder that I've opened. You can see it actually opens a text buffer with the results This may not be intuitive, but what you can actually do here is say, look, okay, so this I'm interested in going here. You can just double click on any of these occurrences and it'll open that file and take you to that occurrence within the file. Kind of nice thing about that is that find results remains open in one of your buffers. So let's see, another thing going into the actual packages here. Open up one of these files. Some of the linting that I talked about that it will do, Python will do for you. Really simple example for PEP8 or Python syntax or Python style checking. There should always be at the module level, there should be 2 lines between your imports and your class definition. So if I take away one of those lines, you'll see it draws a box around this class definition line for me. And if I put my I put my cursor in there, it will tell me down here on the status line, this is in violation of PEP8 E302, expected 2 blanks lines, found 1, right? So this is inline style checking for your code. In the same way it'll do linting. So a good example of this would be, let's say in this combine method, I'm going to say, use me. Right, save that. This is perfectly valid. This is going to work. The only problem is this variable is never used anywhere else, so it's actually useless. And you'll see that's been highlighted. And PyFlakes will tell me that the local variable use me is assigned but never used. Really good for keeping your code clean. So I definitely recommend using, and those came from the Sublime linter package here. Some of the things we were seeing earlier with actual Python syntax completion. Let's see, do we have, yeah, for example, here in logging. Since we've imported logging, I can do logging dot, and you'll see here it actually imports I don't know if it actually imports it, but in some way it goes out and looks at the Python logging module and it finds all the module level attributes. We can put these in here, so we'll say, logging.get logger. Got a tab completed with a tab. Now if I open up my parentheses here, I can actually do a Command J. And if you look down at the status line, it gives me a little tip here. It shows me the actual method signature. So I know that getLogger takes a single parameter, a keyword argument called name, and it returns a logger with a specified name, creating it if necessary. So straight from the documentation for the logging module.